And we're live! What is going on YouTube? Gabus here, and today with me we have the awesome Ryan from the Geek YouTube channel. Hello Ryan. Hello Ryan.
I'm finally here. We did it after months of planning. It's time.
Yeah.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing fine. What about you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm ready to get this started.
I'm actually pretty nervous. As you probably know, this is my third official live stream, and it's not getting any easier. If anything, it's getting more complicated.
It will get easier, trust me. On DL Destination Linux, when we first started doing live streaming, we were all like, it was chaos, and now it's just like, all right, just put it out there the way it is. You just get used to it.
I really hope so. So you want to introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us who you are and something about your channel and Destination Linux in general.
Sure. I'm one of the hosts of Destination Linux podcast, and also run my own YouTube channel, the Geek channel, where we talk about all kinds of geeky things. And in the last couple years, it's only been alive for a couple years, but during that start of the channel, I started playing with Linux, and then I got the Linux community hug of death, and now I'm all pretty much Linux all the time. So that's what a lot of people know me from.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I found you, actually. I started, like, this collaboration starts with you switching to Linux and me becoming a fan of yours.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to say, considering how many subscribers and support your channel has. You have an amazing channel and a ton more technical knowledge than I have. So believe me, I'm the one who should be nervous.
I can't be sure about that. I mean, technical knowledge, it really depends on your field. And today we have a really big topic, and you have some knowledge that I don't. So so I think this video today, this live stream, will be very interesting. A very interesting, like confrontation.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Discussion. Yeah. Well, confrontation, discussion. It depends on how it goes. You know, I'm Team Red now, so I've got to support my AMD. But I'm going to be honest, too. There are some issues there, and we'll get into all of that stuff. But this is a battle for the ages that you see across multiple forums, that you see across all these threads of people saying AMD or Nvidia, which one do I use on Linux? So it's going to be an awesome topic.
Yeah, I mean, over here in Team Green, the things aren't so nice either.
Yes.
So we're gonna be having a lot to talk about. So before starting, I actually wanted to say hi to everyone in the chat. So if you're in the chat right now, you'll be having a couple of minutes to say hi if you wanna be in the live stream. And we're already seeing some trolls. All right. I think I'm gonna hide you from this live stream.
That's a dark one. He likes to troll people all the time. That's kind of his thing.
Is he legit, or is he actually
no, he's
troll?
Fine. He does it all in good fun.
Ah, okay.
That's his thing.
I'm gonna unhide him. I don't know. I see mean comments, and
that's his thing. He loves to troll. Now, normally I would do what you do with trolls, but he's kind of one of those trolls that you also tend to, after a while, start to like. So I don't know how that works, but yeah, that's his thing.
All right. So anyway, we wanted to talk about AMD versus Linux. So let's actually show the chat, because it wasn't showing before. We wanted to talk about this topic because you recently switched to the AMD side, and you bought a Vega 56, and I actually followed you, like, playing around with the Vega 56, and then right after that you went ahead and upgraded to the Vega 64. I mean, the first thought was, where is this guy taking all this money? Yeah, I mean, you're robbing a bank or something.
Yeah, I should. That would be helpful. It'd probably make it easier on my wife as well, because she doesn't understand all these tech purchases all the time. But no, you know, my channel, one of the big things I always wanted to do on my channel was, when I first started and I started looking at Linux videos, and I decided, well, I guess this has become a Linux channel because a lot of people in the Linux community, after I did the 30 days of Linux, kind of swarmed that I was tired of seeing the same videos of people taking old laptops and old hardware and saying, look, Linux runs on this, which is great. I mean, Linux is amazing because it can do that. But nobody's doing videos on Linux running on the latest and greatest stuff. So during that time, I did the NVIDIA 1070, 1080. And then recently, when I got the NVIDIA 56, I was like, okay, well, I'm downgrading from a 1080 to a 56, which is really meant to compete technically with the 1070, not the 1080. And it's people who are used to seeing me play games at 140, 150 frames per second are going to be disappointed because the Vega 56 isn't going to hit that, especially the reference model I had, depending on the game you're playing, of course. And so, yeah, I couldn't send the 56 back, but I sold it on eBay, and I think it was within 2 weeks, and got the 64 because I'm like, look, I've got to push it. I want people to see the latest stuff on Linux, and I've got to have the 64. So that's kind of how I ended up doing that. But explaining that to the wife was far harder than it was explaining it to you.
Yeah, I imagine. I don't think I would have done that either. I wouldn't have justified something like that. Maybe because I'm more tight on money.
Yeah. Well, it definitely helps. I've been in telecom for 18 years and have been working since I was 13. So I usually have a fund that I've learned to set aside for all of my geekery. And that fund keeps rotating. And sometimes I'll buy broken computers and fix them and sell them and make money that way on the side and different things. And as well as the support, that I get on my channel from patrons and people just watching, that money kind of goes into a pool and I use it to show off kind of the latest hardware on Linux. So all that helps, but not in the wife's mind. It didn't help too much.
I imagine the problems understanding something like that. So we gotta know right now. So we know that you switched to AMD, but we don't know why. And this is I already know this story. This is a fun story involving fedoras and Waylands far away, yes. And some insane defaults. At least you found that those are pretty insane right now. And right. The reason that AMD turned out to be a better choice for you, and probably for some of you watching as well. You watching. I should have pointed to the camera.
You people there. You. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So, you want to talk about your experience with Nvidia before getting into the Vega craze?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is a really interesting topic because when you start utilizing, well, first of all, I'm very new to Linux technically because most people seem to be like they've been in Linux for 10, 20 years. I've only been in Linux for 2. So when I first started in my channel, I had the NVIDIA 1070, so that's naturally what I started with Linux. And then, the first distro I downloaded was naturally Ubuntu. So I started playing with Ubuntu and it was fine, but people in the channel would start saying, hey, you know what, you need to try Arch, you need to try Fedora, you need to try these different distros. So a lot of times off stream, I would go try to install them, but I don't know what I'm doing very much. If it's not basically, a GUI-based install, I'm going to get lost. So there were a lot of things that were tripping me up, especially when I would try things like Fedora, which of course has Wayland by default. And I had an Nvidia card. And you know what happens when you have an Nvidia card in Wayland, especially back then, although I hear it's gotten a little better. Maybe.
I know what happens if you have an Nvidia card and you have Fedora with Wayland as default. Nothing happens. I mean,
yeah, a black screen with a cursor blinking, right? Exactly. Yeah. So back then I wouldn't know to switch to X session or even what an X session was. So it was just, okay, Fedora doesn't work. Let me go back to Ubuntu. So I never got to play with some of these other distros that were basically Wayland based or maybe not as friendly to NVIDIA's proprietary drivers where you'd have to spend, time compiling or figuring out PPAs to install all of this stuff, which was especially back then beyond my capabilities. So now, kind of fast forward, I've been playing with the 1080 for a while. Everybody knows the specs of the machine. I decided I want to go Ryzen because Ryzen's killing it right now. So I go the Ryzen 7 2700X. but it just feels like an imposter having the Nvidia card sitting in there. You got Team Red on the CPU, you got Team Green on
Once
the
you go
GPU.
red, you go full
Yeah,
red.
once you go red, you got to go all the way. So I was like, all right, I want to try this Vega, but I had heard horrible things. Well, I don't want to say horrible things. I'd heard really bad things as far as price value to performance with the Vega. And I had also started to hear rumors, though, that things were getting better as they were improving the drivers, the performance was increasing, and I thought, well, it's time to give it a shot. And if my channel's truly going to always be pushing the limits of the latest hardware, we got to see how this rolls in Linux. So that was kind of the deciding factor there, that I wanted to try these other distros I hadn't played with, and I really wanted to see what's the best AMD has to offer. CPU-wise, they absolutely, in my opinion, are on par and better than the i7s that I had previously in my machine. The Ryzen 7 2700X is a beast. GPU-wise, well, that's what this conversation is for. It's cool in some facets, and it has its issues in others.
Let's just say it's complicated.
It's complicated.
It's a complicated relationship.
But we'll get into that complication.
Yeah, exactly. So, I actually, in my system, since I started like PC building, I always wanted, like, had this idea in mind that if you wanted like the best that the market could offer, you had to go Intel, Nvidia, and my PC is kind of the opposite of Ryan's right now, and but it made sense when I built this PC. This little base runs an i7 6700K and a GTX 960, the 4GB version. And when I built, this didn't really come out like as it is right now, because I changed keys, I changed the CPU along the way. The GPU used to be a 760, then it I don't know what happened. It just stopped working. It was one of the worst days in my life, because I didn't want to buy a Maxwell card, but I had to. And at that time, I didn't know. Well, I don't remember if AMD was already the AMD offering was good enough at that time for me to consider it, or if I was just ignorant. I cannot remember when I bought this card. But anyway, here I am with an Intel Nvidia machine, and here I am discussing with the Team Red guy on which platform is better. And I want to talk about some history here before we actually get in today's mentality, because historically the thing with Linux and GPUs has always been, okay, you want to game on Linux, and at that times it meant there was Steam already. There were some games, mostly Team Fortress, Left 4 Dead, and some like indie games. Not many games did run on Linux, but the ones that did, or even Wine, I mean, you had to have an Nvidia GPU. It was like, if you wanted to game on Linux, you had to have Nvidia. And if you didn't, well, then good luck. I mean, there were drivers for the Radeon GPUs. There were drivers for... there were open drivers and proprietary ones, but none of them really worked that nicely. So at some point, I remember just becoming an AMD hater, because I don't like monopolies in the market. And at that time, Intel and Nvidia were a monopoly in the PC space, and I was angry at AMD because they weren't doing anything good, and their support for Linux was basically crap. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't justify, I couldn't see myself buying an AMD card, because I saw them as enemies of Linux and the whole free software community. And that idea, I mean, I wasn't the only one with this kind of idea, and that stuck for a while, both in me and in the community. And I think that really hurt AMD's reputation. And even right now, I think that part of the reason why AMD doesn't have such a great market adoption is partly because of that reputation. But
Yeah.
things do change, and in fact, the things are basically the opposite right now. Because if you you can have either an AMD or an Nvidia card on your Linux box and have a great experience. Well, with some distros more than others, but the thing is that you can get both to run very well at some point. On Ubuntu, I mean, you can get NVIDIA cards working pretty great, like from a simple GUI utility. You can just install the driver and reboot, and you have your fully accelerated 3D accelerated desktop with gaming capabilities working.
Right.
On AMD, you don't even have to do that right now, because if you have a card that supports AMD GPU, the new open source driver, you just have it installed. It's in the kernel. It's the user space part is Mesa, and that's basically all you need. And you're good to go. But it doesn't end there, because there is an important difference between having to run a proprietary driver and being able to run everything on an open source stack. So let me tell you my experience with Nvidia, and by extent the experience of other people with Nvidia. Before AMD started competing, it was basically the only choice. So I'm gonna just skip that part, because it was the only choice. If you wanted anything to work, you either had Nvidia graphics cards or Intel integrated graphics. And Intel integrated graphics, they always were they are still pretty weak, but they work out of the box in Linux. So they're fine. I mean, I guess.
The open source drivers, I wouldn't even go that far to say fine. I think the open source drivers for Nvidia are a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just
I was
that's
talking
my
about
opinion.
Intel.
Oh, you're talking about Intel. Okay,
Yeah.
Intel works great. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, see, I mean, the Nouveau driver for Nvidia, I'm not even considering that, because it's as I was talking previously with Ryan, behind the scenes, the Nouveau driver, I think the work that the people behind the project is doing is incredible, because they're re-implementing a driver for something that is completely closed up and proprietary, and it's impressive that they even got a
Can get
display
that far,
working.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the only target usage target for Nouveau is getting a graphical user interface of some kind to install the proprietary drivers. I think that's basically what they're meant for.
Yeah, I couldn't understand why you would use it, why you would even have a external GPU and use the Nouveau, however you pronounce it, Nouveau drivers out there, because there's really there's no acceleration, there's no advantage to using it, like you said, unless you're just booting in simply to get to the proprietary driver. Otherwise, why even have an NVIDIA GPU? You might as well just use whatever's integrated.
Sometimes you don't have anything integrated. That's
Yeah.
part of the point. And the other part of the point is older cards actually do kind of work with Nouveau, and besides, sometimes they are the only option. Because if we start talking about this, we're gonna get into one of the problems with Nvidia and the proprietary driver solution, is that Nvidia doesn't support all of its cards. Neither does AMD. I mean, but AMD is we can kind of forgive AMD to some extent, because they basically rebooted everything when they started working on AMD GPU. So from Polaris and the family right before that, I think things have changed a lot. So I think we can kind of forgive AMD, but Nvidia. Okay, so AMD is supporting with open source drivers these newer cards. This means that these cards will always be supported, because even if AMD's engineers stop working on direct support for them, the driver is still there. It's still compiled inside of the kernel, and other people can still work on that open source code and maintain it and update it as well as for the old colors as well for the newer ones. Nvidia things get kind of messy, because they do only support newer cards, and recently they dropped support for the 700 series GPUs, and that caused many problems to like a friend of mine that suddenly his 760 he just updated and rebooted, and his 760 just stopped working. After we we reverted to like the 390XX driver branch, everything worked fine. But I mean, Nvidia should like try to find a better way to do this. And my girlfriend actually has a little PC that I built for her, and it has a GT 610 GPU, and that stopped working as well. And we spent like a day trying to figure out what happened. Yeah. So I'm looking at my 960, my PC right now, and it's staring back.
It's staring back as in it's worried it won't be supported in the future? Or?
No, it's staring back as like in it's trying to intimidate me. It's teasing me. I don't know when Nvidia will drop support for it, and when they will, I will need to change this card and spend 300, 400, 500 euros on a new card. I don't really want to do that right now. Especially since the market right now is kind of stale. I'm waiting for new GPUs. I don't want to buy a Tesla. I don't want to buy Pascal, but I want the next AMD card. I'm spoiling my position in this whole argument right now. So sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the AMD has some unique things coming out for it, but it's not all as great as people may think. So I came to the assumption, based on reading certain forums and people's opinions in Linux, that AMD is the way to go if you're on Linux. And to a certain extent, they are correct. You basically plug in the card, you boot up your system, and you start using it. You can literally install Steam, start gaming on it, and that's it. There's no driver installation that you have to go mess with thanks to Mesa and all of this. You don't even have to go to the additional drivers in Ubuntu or try to compile your own drivers. It just works. It doesn't matter if you're in a Wayland session. It doesn't matter if you're in an X session. It doesn't matter if you're in Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch. They all work right out of the box in all of the tests that I've done, whether the Vega 56 or the 64. However, the performance isn't quite there. The performance of the card is fantastic. Now, mind you, we're in ludicrous world here, is what I like to call it. We're not talking about console gamers where their whole goal is to hit 60 frames per second. We're talking, when I talk about performance and comparing the 1080 to the Vega, we're talking about hundreds of frames per second still in both cases, but one getting 10 to 20 frames per second more. The reason why I even bring it up that the performance from the Vega 64 is on par with the 1080, not as good as the 1080 Ti, is because you're paying more for the Vega, and a lot of that has to do with Bitcoin mining in general, but the Bitcoin miners really kind of threw a wrench into the whole GPU market with the spikes in GPU costs and all that. But you're generally going to find better deals on the 1080. And you're going to get better performance in the gaming by 10 to 20 frames per second on average within the games. And that's an interesting thing because Vega came out after the 1080 dropped. And so you're getting less performance, more money, but you get more compatibility. And then there's the driver issue, which we can get into too, which while AMD is doing amazing things with the drivers, making their Vulkan driver open source, making the Mesa driver, their main AMD GPU driver, open source. They're still, I don't think that they did it correctly in the way that they've dropped all this, because there is so much confusion that even me as a massive geek who will sit there and study websites for hours am not quite sure how to get Vulkan running in AMD. Now I know I could do it by installing the AMD GPU Pro drivers. I know I could do it if I was in Arch because the AUR is going to take care of that. But I'm talking about in something that's not Ubuntu 16.04 and not Red Hat, because those are the only two official ones that they support, both with their AMD GPU Pro driver and with their Vulkan driver. So outside of that, you've got to kind of compile and tweak and play with and set up your own config files and all this stuff yourself. And to me, that's an absolute disaster from a user experience coming from NVIDIA, where yes, I have to use a proprietary driver, but I can just click install, usually through a GUI, install the Vulkan libraries, and be off and running in Vulkan within probably 5 clicks total, compared to AMD, which still after 6-7 hours of researching, not quite sure what I'm supposed to do. Big difference there.
Yeah, you hit the point basically. So what I'm showing right now on the screen, if people can see it, is an article by Fir Onyx. I will leave the link actually in the chat. Let me bring up the chat real quick. And this article is it looks like Fir Onyx did this for us. Michael Larrabell didn't. We are not in contact with him.
Can we give a shout out to the genius of Michael there?
Yeah, we can definitely. We need to, because Michael Larrabell is the founder of Fir Onyx, and he is doing a great job. Like apart from benchmarking, so many games, and not only games. I mean, even CPU benchmarks, OpenCL benchmarks. They do it all. And Michael, he is like the founder of this incredible website. If you don't know it already, you should subscribe to like the RSS feed or whatever. Throw money at it.
Throw money at it. I like that one.
Yeah, you should.
He deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, you can even throw money at me if you want to. There's the super chat, but you shouldn't. If you want to throw your money, you should definitely throw it to at Michael or at Ryan, because they're both doing like a great job. And but anyway, so Michael is also the lead developer of the Fir Onyx test suite, which is basically an omni-comprehensive test suite for benchmarking anything. It's great. You should, if you are into benchmarks, you should really try it out. But anyway, let's get back to this article. So Michael here is comparing the performance of quite some games, especially in this article. He is comparing Vulkan performance. So this we're seeing right here is Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is one of the most important titles that recently came out on Linux. And it's an important benchmark, if you will, of the to indicate the state of AAA games on Linux right now. So I played the Rise of the Tomb Raider with decent settings on my GTX 960. The experience wasn't great, and there you have it: 89 frames per second, 1080p, lowest settings.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to point out when you're looking at this chart, you know, when you see the AMD cards there being underneath the Nvidia cards. Number one, a couple of things to consider is, number one is the Vega 64 here. We're talking 4 frame per second to 5 frame per second differences, right? So these are very, very small differences in the frame per second that you're getting here. Although the 1060s, 1080s, etc. do slightly better. It also depends on the game that you're playing, because there are points where the Vega 64 starts to chime ahead in various benchmarks that he's done. It depends on the game. It depends on the settings that you have. In this particular test that he did, it looks like 1080 kind of takes the cake across the board. But again, it's within a very small performance difference between the two. So
yeah, I mean, the performance actually is, the performance difference is pretty small, and I agree with that. But if we really want to talk about it, I mean, the thing is, this game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, is one example, and if you want to see others, I mean, you have like this is just another scene of Rise of the Tomb Raider. You have 124 FPS with Vega 64 and 204 on the GTX 1080 Ti. I know they're just numbers, and mostly you're gonna be fine just getting 60 FPS on for most people. But we're not just talking about most people here. We're talking about like, if you want the best, if you have infinite money to throw at a GPU. Yeah, talking about throwing money again.
These
What
tests
do you,
would have been completely different, though, had you done them back when Vega 64 released. One of the interesting things to me with the Vega is AMD released it, it seems like, to me, before they fully knew how to even get the performance they wanted out of the card. And when you look at the early benchmarks, the Vega 64 looks like a piece of junk. I mean, it is really bad benchmarks when the card first dropped, and then AMD started dropping new driver enhancements and all this stuff, and now we're at today where it's pretty much competing with the 1080. It's not at the 1080 Ti level, but it's competing with the 1080. But you also have these other factors in the market that I think you have to take into consideration as well with AMD, that Nvidia tends to buy out a lot of games, sponsor them during their development. So when you open a game like Rise of Tomb Raider, it will give you a warning like, oh, you don't have an Nvidia GPU, your performance is not going to be optimal. So you know Nvidia is doing something there behind the scenes with the developers to kind of give themselves a little bit of an edge. Now you can say that's smart business practice, and you'd be right, and you could say it's kind of shady business practice, and you'd also be right. But there's something to be said about that as well, because you can see in the different games there's a huge difference in performance there. But certainly for if you're only considering gaming and your performance for that, then yeah, the 1080 you can't argue is just a faster card. Not by a ton, but it's just a little bit faster there.
yeah, I mean, sorry. The thing here is really, um, the biggest problem that AMD is suffering for the Vega 64 and the Vega 56 is market adoption, in my opinion. Because I mean, it's the chicken and the egg problem, where really if you have like a GPU, is a really specialized piece of hardware, and you see if you actually read some of the change logs in the driver updates of GPUs in general, you tend to see a lot of, oh, fix this issue in this particular game, and it sounds weird, as if they're optimizing the driver for the game and not vice versa. And
Right.
many times it's not like that. It's not that they're optimizing for that specific game. It's that that game uses some features that expose some bugs and stuff like that. But the fact is that driver developers can only see that in when the card is actually used. So there is no amount of testing that can show the full extent of problems or little fixes that could be done to a driver to have better performance. And the problem here is that AMD GPUs could be faster because on paper they really have a lot of potential.
Yes.
But they are not because of the lower market adoption, and they don't get more market adoption because the performance to price ratio is not that great.
Yeah.
Compared to
Unless you're a
Nvidia.
Bitcoin miner. For some reason, if you're a Bitcoin miner, then you're going to be the happiest with AMD always.
Yeah, because that's a different story. Because AMD actually, AMD cards have always been quite better with general purpose programming, general purpose GPU programming. So OpenCL on AMD has always been great. CUDA isn't that bad either, but it depends on what you need to do. AMD GPUs in many fields are faster. They have a little bit of an edge over Nvidia.
Yeah.
And that's why they have been like brutalized. The whole like market stock of AMD GPUs has been brutalized by miners. To be fair, it's not actually Bitcoin. You cannot mine effectively Bitcoin with a GPU anymore. You would need an ASIC miner. I know a little bit of mining myself.
Uh-oh, you're one of the problem people.
Not really, because
You're the
I
reason
didn't.
why I had to pay like 300% over market value for a
No,
GPU
because
because of your Bitcoin.
I didn't buy hardware for it. I just played around with it with mining on my already pre-existing hardware. And the thing with cryptocurrencies is they get so much hate, but they really, because they influence the market in such a meaningful way. But they are the future. But this is a topic for another day, really.
Sure.
But anyway, the fact is that many things came for AMD that ruined the Vega lineup for the current market, because they didn't get very good performance like on launch.
Yep.
But OpenCL performance for the price was really great, and so all the GPU miners, mostly people mining Ethereum or other GPU mineable coins, started buying a lot of Vega cards, and the market basically was flooded by Bitcoin miners, and and there were no cards to be seen. At some point, you could not buy, could not.
It was amazing. You could walk into any of the hardware stores here, and all the area where they would sell cards, the shelves were completely blank, like gone. It was just, it was shocking. I'd never seen anything like it in all the history of computing. That, no matter if you went through Newegg, you went through Best Buy, you went through Fry's Electronics, you went any of these places, the shelves were empty. Never has it happened before, right? I mean, just incredible.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, I couldn't see this thing myself, because here in Italy, there are electronics shops, of course, but PC components don't get quite the same attention that they get, I think, in the US. They don't get any attention at all, really. There are some specialized shops that sell components for like absurd prices, but
right.
I really count them because if you're gonna go above MSRP, why should you go above MSRP if not for a market problem? Just because the guy knows that anyone that's gonna walk in doesn't know shit about what they're buying, so they're gonna just overpay for it.
Right.
That's not a problem. But I mean, mining was one of the problems. The memory shortage that we're seeing still at this point is another problem that concurred to the growing price of the Vega cards. And at some point, Vega got kind of old. Not really old, but it's there. It's out there. It's been out there for a while, and the market adoption isn't great. And there were many improvements to the drivers because of the poor market adoption, and people are not willing to buy AMD cards because of the poor performance. At the same time, we have this open source problem. We have this problem on the Linux side of things, where you would really want to buy an AMD GPU if you really cared about having a great user experience. If it wasn't for two problems, as we said before: one, performance isn't great compared to Nvidia for the same price. Two, the thing about the whole story about the AMD GPU and AMD GPU Pro drivers is terribly weird and complicated to get around. Even myself, I read so many times the article about AMD GPU Pro on the Arch Wiki and couldn't figure out any of it. I did some experiments.
I am so glad you said that. That makes me feel so much better, because I'm just wondering, like, I sat there and I stared at this when I got it. I'm like, am I just dumb or I don't get this? And the problem is there are so many people who have, I think, throughout the years tried to figure out tweaks because of AMD's poor driver support historically in Linux, that half the time when you're searching for a solution, you're getting articles from 2 years ago that no longer are valid. Like, do you still enable DRI3 manually through your Xvorg conf file now, or is that built into the latest Mesa? because everybody in every forum right now, when you start looking for performance, will tell you to go enable DRI3. Well, later you learn that I think message drivers actually have DRI3 enabled now by default. But you're sitting there trying to piece all of this stuff together to figure out, what am I using as a driver? The end result is this: if you have an AMD driver, you install it, you use the message driver, you're good. You really don't touch anything. It's as good as it's going to get. But I will argue one point with you, and that is that, Vega, I think, has not gotten old, but has actually gotten way, way better than it's ever been before.
There have been
But I understand your point in saying that it's still performance-wise behind Nvidia. And look, you can't argue with the facts. It is what it is. The performance is shrinking. And I think we have yet to see, one of the reasons why I decided to invest in Vega 64 is because of the massive difference in performance from when they started to now. Now, do I agree with AMD's decision? No. I love they went open source, but I don't agree that they launched this card and did not have proper driver support. But
I don't think they could have done any better than they're doing right now, to be honest.
I think we're gonna see more performance out of the Vega in the next couple of months with the latest message drivers than we even see today. I think the card's gonna continue to get better and better. And the reason why I say that is there are so many people out there on the forums who have figured out little tweaks and changes and things to go in and do that increase the performance of the card, that now that AMD has open sourced their drivers, people will start trying to, in the open source community, incorporate those changes into it. However, when you want to see Nvidia or AMD's potential to actually beat Nvidia is going to be at the point where they release their new 7 nanometer GPUs that are supposed to be announced this year.
That's going to be a different story.
Yeah.
That's going to be quite crazy. I mean, a different story again. But as of right now, the market is what it is, and I mean, this video actually really also applies for the future. So if you're watching this when AMD 7 nanometers, Nvidia 7 nanometers is already out, then hello from the past, I guess. But really, the driver thing is like the most important deciding factor for Ryan right now. And it will be for me when I'm going to be changing my actual
So you're going to
GPU.
go AMD? Are you announcing officially your Team Red?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there is not really too much to be surprised, to be honest, because I am big for open source. And open source and free software, they are two things that go together hand in hand. And there is a reason for why open source is important and free software is important, but one thing is talking about software freedom, one thing is talking about actual getting stuff done, and open source is the most effective way to get stuff done. And we've seen this in so many ways. Let's take one example of proprietary versus open source. Windows versus Linux. I think Microsoft abandoned Windows. At some point, they just decided that they're not gonna be bothering anymore.
That way.
Yeah, and I mean, we won. We already won. The market share for Linux isn't still great, but it's getting better and better. And in my opinion, from my point of view, Linux already won. I don't need to fight anymore. Really. I could stop this.
It's interesting. I want to stop on that point because people talked about the mythical year of the Linux, right? And it's like a meme now. People joke about it. But I really think it's here. I mean, when you saw the Microsoft change their new, what was it, Sphere program, Azure, whatever it was called, to Linux.
This is bullshit. This is bullshit. Yeah, Microsoft is doing to keep up with the server space.
To keep up, right? Because they realize they've lost that game entirely. When I look at 18 years of being in the telecom market, all of the back-end telecom networks are running Linux, not Windows. Like all of the infrastructure of the International Space Station, the government's military, all of this is running on Linux. The year of the Linux literally is right now. Like you guys are riding the wave of it, making jokes about when's the year of Linux going to happen. Windows is pretty much abandoned. They've announced they're not going to release any new versions of Windows. So you're not going to get new official versions. They're just going to keep rolling Windows 10 indefinitely. They've made fun of their own product essentially by saying at one point that the reason why they went with Linux with their new network platform is because theirs was too bloated. Like, they just said that in a statement. It was odd. I think the year of the Linux is here. The market share is going to come, and it's going to come in a massive wave. The biggest problem Linux is going to have is both the strength of Linux and its biggest weakness, which is its community. The community is the most beautiful part of Linux. It's also the most ugly part of Linux. And we're going to have an influx of people coming in that are new and don't understand technology but want to use it. And if the trolls kind of get a hold of them first, we're in big trouble. So I'm hoping more people like you are around that are willing to take the time to explain and help people understand stuff, because I think that's very important. But the fact that, you know, I wanted to stop you there because I think this year of the Linux thing is very important, and that's why AMD, which I think is where you're going, is making such a big impact, even though its performance isn't quite there, by it open sourcing its drivers. Major shift in the market and what traditionally we would expect from a GPU company.
Okay, first about the community. We're just gonna need to DDoS Reddit. That's gonna be fine.
Yes, that's the problem, isn't it? Reddit. Yeah. If we could get rid of Reddit, we'd be fine. I think you're right.
The problem really is that I'm one of them.
You're one of the trolls?
No, not really, but to some extent, okay. I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So getting back to the point, the fact that you need to get things done. At the end of the day, you just need to get to work and do what you need to do. And what's the easiest way of doing it? In my opinion, in my work, I'm studying computer science, and I'm already a programmer. I can say that, and I'm in the technical field. And of course, in my field, the most effective way of doing stuff is working with open source stuff. And let me give you an example. Recently, I've been having a discussion with a friend of mine about game engines. He would want to start developing indie games, and he was thinking about Unity, but he wasn't really sure because he uses Linux too. He is in a dual boot situation, but he does use Linux, and he would have wanted to start using Unity, but he's unsure because he's heard that performance isn't great, that the language C# mono that he's using is not great for some stuff he would want to do.
Right.
And it just came to me, why don't you just try Godot? You know, the new open source game engine that recently launched. It's so easy. It's open source. You don't have licensing problems. You can just use it. I've seen the demos. It's great. It's the best way of doing stuff. I mean, you see it with Linux. I mean, you have, if you plug like a USB device in Windows, it's gonna take like 2 or 3 minutes because it needs to do something with drivers and stuff with
kernel. To do something is the best description of what Windows is doing, because that's what we're constantly wondering. What is it doing?
Exactly. I mean, it's emblematic. The picture, the error message of the blue screen, something happened, is emblematic of this situation.
Right.
At some point, it seems that not even Microsoft knows what's going on behind the scenes. But anyway, the most effective way of doing things is doing it with open source, because you can build.
It's true.
Let's take another example. Let me show you a computer that's the size of a credit card, if I can find it. I wanted to make like a really cool thing. I wanted to show you. I'm bad at this. Okay, there it is. This is a first-gen Raspberry Pi. This stupid thing here that costed me $30. Yes. This is probably the worst $30 that I've ever spent in my entire life, because it's underpowered and it's stupid. It doesn't do very much. But at the same time, it started a revolution. This thing runs Linux and Linux only.
How can you call that thing stupid? It's amazing. I love the Raspberry Pi. You can run servers off of this. You can run stack node. No, the first model maybe a piece of crap. You're right.
Yeah,
I have the 3. I only have the 3.
The
Okay,
3 is
that's
another
what you
story.
meant. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a piece of crap. If you have a Raspberry Pi 1, you can just throw it away because it's useless.
It's a
But if you
paperweight,
have,
basically.
and not even, it's pretty lightweight.
You can't even use it for a paperweight.
No.
That's terrible. But you're right. It did start a revolution.
Exactly. And the revolution with Linux. And it was
right.
possible just because of Linux, because Windows just runs on x86.
Mm-hmm.
And Linux runs on anything. If you want to run Linux on a toaster, I'm pretty sure you can do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could too.
And that's the entire point. If you want to have something that works and goes out of boundaries, it pushes boundaries, it pushes the concept of computing, the concept of what is standard. Open source is like the way of doing it, and AMD is riding this wave. I'm not sure where they're gonna go with it, but I'm happy that they're at least trying with this approach, because the open
Do you think
source
they could go back now at this point? I mean, I think once you kind of make that commitment that you're going to put all of your proprietary stuff and open it up, it's almost impossible to go back. Are there examples where somebody has in the past? Because I can't think of any.
They do still have a proprietary driver stack?
They do, but all of their work is going into their open source stack. So they actually tell you now, don't run the AMD GPU Pro, run the Mesa stack because it has the latest updates in it. So at this point, they've basically opened up Pandora's box. There's no going back, is there?
I would hope to say that, but really with big companies, you can never tell what's going to happen next.
That's a fair point.
It's the thing is that it's not geeks that run those companies. It's not people like me and you. Because if it was that way, we probably would be already like all happy running open source stuff, everything, and everything would be good, and rainbows would be made of sugar and stuff like that. But this is
the 64 would be dominating frames per second. Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. I mean, the thing is that in the real world, economics and market and bad people making bad decisions and non-technical people making technical decisions, stuff that happens.
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Nvidia right now is not in a great spot, in my opinion, because everything they're doing is out of standard. From their hardware to their software to anything, basically. Let me give you this example. AMD has OpenCL for GPU, but OpenCL is not really done by AMD. It's done by the Kronos group, and it's a standard, a common language for general purpose graphical processing unit computation for scientific purposes and for computational purposes of any kind. Nvidia does kind of support OpenCL. Their implementation is pretty weird. That does kind of work sometimes more than others, but they don't really want to invest too much in it. And in fact, there are some suspects that they're actually crippling the OpenCL performance on their cards, because they do have something else called CUDA. And CUDA is basically the same thing as OpenCL, but it's NVIDIA only. And I've studied both for university, and I made the project for as an exam, and I made it in OpenCL, even if I have an NVIDIA card. And people around me kept telling me, "Oh, why don't you use CUDA? Performance is better," and blah blah blah. It's not like that. I mean, CUDA just works on NVIDIA. If you are used to CUDA on NVIDIA, or if you're used to OpenCL on NVIDIA, and you see the performance is better with CUDA, that's because NVIDIA is crippling it. And that's pretty obvious if you ask me, because they have a competing platform. And if you get sucked into the CUDA ecosystem, you will not be able to run that CUDA software that you wrote on any other card, and you're just gonna be able to run it on NVIDIA. And that's a big problem. They're trying to lock you up. And the same thing happens with PhysX and many other technologies. Really, I can't name them all, but they have a lot of technologies that are proprietary, and they basically do the same thing that other technologies already do. But the caveat is that everything that they do is to some extent it's free-ish to use, but you can only run it on Nvidia cards. That's the limit, and that's a big limit. Also because Nvidia is mostly a company that produces desktop and server and workstation GPUs. But what about the mobile space, the IoT space? Those spaces are dominated by ARM chips that have different GPUs, and CUDA doesn't run on them. CUDA to some extent runs on Nvidia's own ARM SoCs, but this doesn't really count too much because they're expensive and not really that popular in the IoT space.
Yeah, not competitive.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example. I mean, we're not comparing like OpenCL with CUDA. We're comparing AMD and Nvidia on Linux. But this is an example of how Nvidia likes to close things up and limit the usability, and cripple everything around it as much as possible to keep you tied to them. But at some point,
it's an old school mentality. It's very similar to how Microsoft used to run things, where they basically lock you into their architecture and then you can't get out. But it really, the way businesses are changing is proving that this type of model is going to lead to failure. And that's why I think AMD's ahead. But you mentioned something very, ahead by trying to go open source. And I use the word trying because, for instance, OpenCL, you mentioned before the show that there are some workarounds to get OpenCL working in the Mesa proprietary drivers, but currently you would have to do a workaround to get OpenCL to work on the AMD OpenCL drivers, for instance, in a Fedora or an Ubuntu or something where you don't have access to an AUR where somebody from the community's already built it. You would have to use the AMD GPU Pro drivers to use that function. So even though they're spending most of their time in keeping the most current updates going in their open source Mesa drivers, things like OpenCL, which is more of a professional use case in general, you're not going to be able to use that unless you have the AMD GPU Pro drivers, which aren't quite as updated as the Mesa drivers when it comes to gaming. So they're in this flux, to me, where they're going in the right direction, they're doing the right thing, but we're in the transition period of that, and I sure hope it cleans up because it's kind of ugly right now.
Exactly. That's like one of the biggest problems. If I wasn't running Arch, I wouldn't be considering an AMD GPU, to be honest. What you're referring to is the fact that the OpenCL loader for AMD GPUs right now, the only one that really works is only into the AMD GPU Pro driver. And again, on Arch, as you said, there are ways to install it. It's an AUR package that basically just installs the OpenCL AMD GPU Pro driver while keeping the open source driver in place and not touching anything else. And you can do the same thing with the Vulkan driver, I think. I'd need to double check. But anyway, the thing is that it's very difficult if you're not running Arch, and I think there are PPAs or stuff like that, but
I think Obi, what is the one who's really popular? Obi Off's driver PPAs. He usually stacks open. Apparently, he does a bunch of work to stack all of the most current Mesa drivers and Vulkan stuff and everything into a single PPA. I haven't tried it, so don't take my word for that, but that's just what I've been hearing in the research, because we talked about the OpenCL and then the AMD GPU Pro issue, but there's also the Vulkan issue, which we touched on, which annoys me to death, because AMD's supposed to just really soar when it comes to Vulkan, but good luck getting the RAD-V or the AMD VLK compiled in something outside of maybe an Arch where an AUR's done it for you, because in the AMD GPU Pro, it comes with the Vulkan driver. In the Mesa, you have to try to install it yourself. Anytime I've ever tried to run straight Vulkan on the Vega 64, instant computer entire freeze. You can't control F1, Alt F1, F2, F3, F4, do anything. It will literally just lock the entire machine up. So I have no idea how to get Vulkan running in AMD outside of using the AMD GPU Pro drivers. These are the areas where, do you need to run Vulkan right now? No, not unless you're a developer. And then you would be using the GPU Pro drivers anyways. but it's annoying to me because I love to run Vulkan because of the performance that you get out of it at times. To do that effectively, I probably have to go to Arch because it's just simpler, because I just go to the AUR and probably download the work somebody else has already done to make it work.
I think we can find a solution to that. Maybe another collab we can solve your problems without going to Arch, because that's I don't like solutions that like limit the user. I want, if something is possible in Arch, you can do it on Fedora. We just need to know the simplest way to do that.
See, we know you could fix this. We just got to get you a Vega 64. Everyone donate right now to him. Let's get him a Vega 64, and then he will find a fix for the Vulkan driver, right?
Yeah, people, down in the super chat, give me some money. I need to buy the Vega 64 to fix Ryan's issue.
$600 in super chats. I mean, what's the big
change.
deal?
I mean, I can arrange a change.
Pocket change. I love it.
Anyway, at the end of the day,
it's interesting with all these issues, though, that you still say you're going to go AMD, and it's because you're a big open source person. Obviously, professionally, this is where you're going to go, you know, from a career standpoint and programming standpoint. So even though you know you can get better performance in gaming out of your Nvidia, you're going AMD because you think that's the future.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, again, I need to get stuff done. If that stuff that I need to get done is gaming, I need to get gaming. Oh, thank you, Rocco from Geek Daddy Linux. They just made a donation, $2. Thank you very much, Rocco. Very much appreciated. It's actually my first super chat donation. That's really nice. Thanks. But anyway, as I was saying, if you need to, the thing that you need to get done is gaming, then yes, the fastest way and the easiest way to do it is with open source stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, again, the Vega 64 problem with Vulkan, with OpenCL, it's solvable because Arch people solved it, and Arch people are weird because they like to keep things
you
in
could
their
just
little
stop that
word.
Arch people are weird. No, I'm teasing. I love Arch myself.
Yeah, I use Arch myself. I mean, I know what it feels like to use Arch because I do, and I know. Okay, let me tell you this. I do some AUR packages myself, mostly for programs that I write. Some other packages I didn't really release them in the AUR because I didn't want to maintain them, but I did some packages for myself. And it's so easy to make a package on Arch. It's like stupidly easy. And at the same time, doing the same thing on Debian or Fedora, you need a degree basically just to know how to do that. And that's why you see so many things coming to Arch by basically non-programmers. The people that do this kind of things are mostly hackers. Basically, hacker in the like hacker in the traditional meaning, of course, in the meaning that they know how the system works. Maybe they are not very technical, but they do know enough to make it work and replicate it in a package. And if you can make a package easily, and that's Arch, you can help so many other people. And the thing is, we can get around that. Maybe it will not be as easy as like installing a package from the AUR, but maybe running a script. Maybe that's it. Who knows? I need to explore that, and maybe we can talk about it like off camera.
I'd love that. I would love that, absolutely. And then the other thing that's interesting is we're gonna have a third player, rumor has it, in the GPU market. Not that they're not a player today, but I'm talking in the gaming section of high-end external GPU market, which is Intel. They are rumored to be launching their own GPU line that's to compete with AMD and Nvidia. And Intel's had an interesting run with Mesa, with Vulkan, with open sourcing drivers. They have a very good, from my understanding, track record when it comes to this as of recent. So is this going to throw everything off and you're going to end up with a Intel GPU maybe? Who knows? Whatever they're going to call it.
Intel is a weird company because
they are.
From one point, like from one perspective, Intel gives and Intel takes. because they do have open source GPU drivers, and that's really great because
Right.
Intel GPUs just work on any Linux, and I have yet to see an Intel GPU that doesn't work on Linux. But the thing about Intel is that they are also kind of a shady company. The thing about Meltdown, they could be starting to fix it like in their silicon right now, but they're not. Instead, they're releasing new CPUs over new CPUs because they are afraid of
Is this the patch you were referencing that Linus Torvalds told was complete crap? Didn't he tell Intel
the software patch story is another thing, and I don't blame Intel for that. I'm talking about fixing it in the silicon itself. So starting to think about how to avoid the meltdown vulnerability from like a physical standpoint, because the meltdown issue is like is there because it's a physical flaw in the way that the speculative execution implementation is done, like in hardware, because at that level hardware is just I mean there's no software really, it's just hardware and how transistors are arranged and stuff like that. So I think they really should start working on that instead of releasing new CPUs just to compete with AMD. At the same time, the thing is that Intel also is doing some shady stuff with the management engine and the microcode stuff and updates. It's not really a likable company from my point of view. Intel dedicated GPUs could be interesting, and to some extent, I think that to some extent they're more targeted towards like offices, pre-builds, maybe if they're high-end enough, maybe scientific computation, who knows, but I don't think that they're really gonna be competing directly in the consumer
I'm
gaming
always
market.
excited about additional players coming into the market, irregardless if I love the company or not, just because I think, you know, it helps to drive the innovation. Zeb, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, Zeb, thank you.
We're going to get you that Vegas 64 there. See, that's how it works. We're going to get you that Vegas 64.
Yeah,
but,
just give me a second because I wanted to say thank you to Zeb too. Zeb the boss. £2. Keep filling the pot, pips. Thank you very much for your donation. It's really appreciated. You guys are really awesome. These two guys are, as well as Ryan, they are from the Destination Linux podcast. You should really go and check it out. It's a really great and interesting and fun podcast to listen to. It's quickly become one of my favorites. So just make sure to check it out. Destination Linux. You will find Ryan as well. So
there you go.
It's a big family.
Nice. Yeah, Zeb recently got the Vegas 64, by the way, and he came from, I think Zeb had the 1080 as well, and he's kind of doing that thing I did when I got the 56 at first, where he's like, wait a minute, I was expecting it to be faster in gaming than say the Nvidia, but it's really not faster. It's not horrible. You're still well above 60 frames per second. In many cases, you're well above in the 100 frames per second. We're in ludicrous mode, but not quite. Say if the Nvidia is getting 130 that you're used to, the Vega 64 is getting 110, 115. So still amazing performance, but not quite at the same. So he's still figuring out where. I think Zeb's still on that fence. He's not quite sold on whether he's going to put his Nvidia back in or stick with the Vega 64. But hopefully this conversation kind of helps him. But where I was going with the market is, you know, I have a friend that works at Google, for instance, and one of the things he told me about back when this was back before Ryzen came out. AMD obviously is a major purchaser of CPUs. You could imagine they have techs that just sit in rooms swapping out CPUs because they burn them out all the time because of all the processing they're doing. Yeah. And he said that Google basically will buy 50% AMD and 50% Intel. Now this is back before Ryzen, when AMD frankly didn't really have a lot of great offerings. They're okay, but nothing really to compete with the Intel side. And the reason that they gave was that basically Google does not want to give an unfair advantage to one company or the other by purchasing 100% of Intel's, let's say, because they're faster, and leaving AMD out completely to die because obviously they have a huge amount of money they're spending on these CPUs. And that was one of the first times I actually heard something Google did really well that was good for the market. But this is the type of competition. So to me, Intel entering the market of GPUs is only going to mean we're going to get better things from AMD and Nvidia out there, meaning I hope that they do push in the consumer market. I hope they come out with a great offering, and I hope they push AMD and Nvidia to come out with better things than we even have today. I mean, that's the very essence of competition.
Yeah, I really hope so. Just a quick shout out to Dark One Linux. You started off so badly, mate, with a pseudo insulting comment.
You're trolling.
Yeah, I didn't know you. Sorry, but it just made $2 adding to the pot. Thank you very much, man. That's really appreciated. So if you're having it in your comments, I couldn't know you weren't for real. So big shout out to Dark One Linux, Tech Gaming. So about the competition thing you were talking about, I mean, yes, competition is always a good thing in any situation because it just pushes people forward, pushes companies forward. So
right.
Intel itself, they're being pushed by AMD, by Ryzen. And Threadripper, they're doing so much now because of AMD, and that's always great. Even if you're like
yes.
Team Blue or Team Green, you should cheer for any success that AMD has because it's gonna
right.
mean better competition on the other side of the market. So I think to wrap this up, we wanna give some final thoughts to anyone out there that wants to buy a GPU and use it for Linux right now.
Okay. So I'm gonna give you want to give your final thoughts on where you fall in this category, and then I'll give mine, and we'll okay.
I'm not gonna actually give my personal opinion myself.
What?
Yeah, I mean you have to see all the perspectives, and my perspective is not everyone's. So
sure.
Let's say if you want to get the best bang for your buck, like you have a set amount of money and you want to get the best you can get for that money, and that GPU has to last for as long as possible, and you want to game on it and have the best performance you can get for your money, absolutely go with Nvidia. That's the way you should go, because if at the end of the day you need you can make compromises for the best performance, you should get an Nvidia GPU.
Yeah. If money is an issue and that's the only thing you care, I mean, your main focus is chasing frames per second and longevity, I think going Nvidia, because AMD, number one, the cards run far hotter, which in any situation, cars or anything else where you have something running far hotter, generally they're going to burn out a little bit faster. And if you're just looking at gaming by itself, Nvidia performance for price right now, especially with what Bitcoin miners, and I'm blaming you, Tech Bills. No, I'm kidding. According to what Bitcoin miners have done with the AMD market, pushing them far above MSRP, I think dollar for dollar, you're getting a better value out of Nvidia. Unfortunately.
So we're saying the same thing.
Yes.
But is this?
I think if money is not that concern and you're not facing game frame per second chasing in just games, meaning I need that 130 versus that 120 frames per second in the game, and you're looking to support open source and for distro hopping in Linux, meaning you want to be able to go to any distro anytime on your machine and it always works. You want to play with Wayland, you want to play with X, and it just works. You can't get a better value than the AMD card.
Absolutely. Also, I want to adapt to that. If you are a developer, especially if I have some friends that actually, I have a friend that likes to write game engines for fun. He really likes that. He is writing a Vulkan game engine. He's gonna call it Magma. I don't know if I should say that. I mean, yes, I can. It's gonna be
It's
open
too
source.
late to take it back now.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
We're live.
I mean, when it's gonna come out, if it's gonna come out, it will be open source, so everyone wins. Anyway, if you are a developer and if you want to develop like a game engine in particular, I really suggest you go the AMD route, because they do. First thing, you can see what the GPU is doing under the hood to some extent, because you see the source of the driver. And on the other hand, you can also have a good sense of security in knowing that AMD does fully respect the both the Vulkan and the OpenGL and the OpenCL standards. And the same thing cannot be said for Nvidia, that does things their own special and snowflakey way. So if you're really serious and you're a developer, I really suggest you go with AMD. Unless you really invest in the CUDA ecosystem, in that case, maybe why are you even considering hearing a second opinion if you are? But anyway, I think this is gonna wrap it up for this video. What do you think, Ryan?
Yep, I think so too, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah,
I appreciate you so much having me on your channel. It's definitely an honor, and I think we could do some more stuff too. I heard you wanted to possibly do a video in the future with me on an Xorg versus Wayland, which, man, that might get heated. We might have to like throw some popcorn at the screen at each other and stuff on that one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's actually something we've been discussing. And yeah, I mean, it's been my pleasure really to have you on my channel. It's been really great talking to you and having this kind of conversation together. I think I really hope my viewers and my subscribers liked it as well. But if they're anything like me, they have, and they will.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah,
love it.
All right. So guys, this is gonna wrap it up for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you like this video, please make sure to press the thumbs up button down there. And also remember to check out, to subscribe to my channel for more of these. Also, check out Ryan's channel, Das Geek. You will find it at youtube.com/DasGeek. You see here is the link. Yeah, here's the link, youtube.com/DasGeek. Check it out. Ryan is doing some great job. Like he does some hardware reviews, some gaming performance reviews. And if you want to see how it feels like to have a shiny and fancy Vega 64 in your system and what it feels like, definitely check out Ryan's channel. Yep. So again, thank you very much for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.